There's a guy who parks his 2011 Honda Civic in the same lot every morning. Faded paint, small dent on the rear bumper. Nothing special. His coworkers assume he's struggling, maybe living paycheck to paycheck, perhaps one emergency away from real trouble. What they don't know is that he has $4.2 million in index funds. His house is paid off. His kids' college funds are fully funded. He could retire tomorrow if he wanted. He chooses the Civic on purpose. Today's video is about why that choice, the deliberate decision to look ordinary while being quietly wealthy, might be the most important financial strategy most people never figure out. And the research behind it is more compelling than you'd expect.
Here's where the data immediately flips your assumptions. According to research from the Millionaire Next Door, the median price millionaires pay for their cars is just $31,367. An Experian automotive study found that 61% of people earning over $250,000 drive Hondas, Toyotas, or Fords. Not BMWs, not Mercedes, regular cars that blend into any parking lot in America. Meanwhile, 8% of people earning under $100,000 own luxury vehicles. They're spending $60,000 on cars while making $50,000 a year. One group looks wealthy. The other group actually is wealthy. These are rarely the same people. That gap between looking wealthy and being wealthy is exactly what this video's about.
My name is Jude, and I spend a lot of time looking at the gap between how wealthy people behave and how people think wealthy people behave. Those two things are very different. If you want to understand the real patterns behind building and keeping wealth, not the social media version, the actual research, subscribe and hit the like button if this ends up being useful. Let's get into it. Thomas Stanley and William Danko spent decades studying actual millionaires across America. Their findings shattered every assumption about what wealthy people look like. 80% of millionaires are first-generation affluent. They didn't inherit their money. They built it themselves from scratch. Half of them have lived in the same house for more than 20 years. They are more likely to drive a Ford than a Bentley. And the researchers found that millionaires were disproportionately clustered in middle-class and blue-collar neighborhoods, not affluent communities. This surprised even the researchers, who expected the opposite. The explanation is simple. High-income white-collar professionals tend to devote their income to luxury goods and status items. They're playing a visibility game. Actual wealth builders play a completely different game.
This isn't just a pattern among regular millionaires. It shows up at the very top, too. Jeff Bezos drove a Honda Accord for years after building Amazon into a trillion-dollar company. Mark Zuckerberg was spotted in an Acura TSX. Larry Page, co-founder of Google, drove a Toyota Prius. Warren Buffett still lives in the same house he bought in 1958 for $31,500. These aren't people who can't afford better. They're people who've decided that looking wealthy isn't worth the cost of actually being wealthy. That decision and the thinking behind it is what separates them from people who earn a lot and build nothing.
The sociologist Thorstein Veblen introduced the concept of conspicuous consumption over a century ago. His central observation was that people don't just buy products for utility, they buy signals. Luxury brands aren't selling materials, they're selling narrative. A $50,000 watch tells time exactly as well as a $50 watch. The extra $49,950 buys something else entirely, the ability to signal status to others.
Every leased BMW represents a monthly payment that could have gone into investments. Every designer handbag represents shares of index funds that weren't purchased. Every status symbol has an opportunity cost measured in decades of compound growth. Let me make the math concrete. The difference between a $30,000 car and an $80,000 car, that $50,000 gap invested over 25 years at 7% annual returns becomes roughly $270,000. Not $50,000, $270,000. That is the real price of looking wealthy. A 2025 Empower study found that 62% of everyday millionaires still budget, shop deals, and avoid extravagant lifestyles even after crossing the $1 million threshold. They understand that the habits that built wealth are the same habits that preserve it.
The visibility of wealth creates problems that invisibility stole entirely. According to Javelin Research, cybercriminals stole the identities of 6.4% of the general public. That number jumped to 8.1% for high net worth individuals. Affluent Americans are 43% more likely to experience identity theft compared to the general population. The more visibly wealthy you are, the larger the target on your back. High net worth individuals face what security experts call whaling attacks, meticulously crafted operations using profiles assembled from social media, data breaches, and open source intelligence. Attackers impersonate trusted advisors, private bankers, or family members to extract sensitive information or authorize fraudulent transfers. The Federal Trade Commission reported that Americans lost $10.3 billion to fraud in 2023. Investment fraud alone accounted for $4.6 billion, with sophisticated schemes specifically targeting affluent individuals. Looking wealthy advertises exactly what you have. Looking ordinary protects it.
When you drive a luxury car, people assume you can afford expensive dinners. When you wear designer clothes, colleagues expect you to pick up the tab. When you live in an affluent neighborhood, the baseline spending of everyone around you quietly inflates your own expectations. Research on social comparison shows that status is relational. It only exists relative to others. In high inequality environments, status signaling becomes more aggressive. The distance between tiers widens and comparison intensifies. The person with the luxury car needs a bigger luxury car next year just to maintain their relative position. The treadmill never stops. The person driving the old Honda sidesteps this entire system. Nobody expects them to pay more than their share. Nobody resents them for having more. Nobody treats them differently because of perceived wealth. That social invisibility provides something that money literally cannot buy.
Research indicates that high net worth individuals frequently report a paradox of increased power paired with decreased trust. Relationships become harder to evaluate. They can never be certain whether someone likes them or their money. Every new friendship carries that uncertainty. The person who looks middle class while being quietly wealthy avoids this problem entirely. Their friendships are based on who they are, not what they have. Their relationships were never filtered through the lens of perceived financial status. This social invisibility isn't a consolation prize for not being able to afford nice things. It's a deliberate, strategic choice made by people who understand that authentic relationships are genuinely harder to build once visible wealth enters the picture.
The authors of the Millionaire Next Door created a framework that separates wealth builders from wealth destroyers. Pause. Prodigious accumulators of wealth. UAWs, under-accumulators of wealth. The categories have nothing to do with income and everything to do with behavior. A $50,000 a year janitor can be more of a paw than a $700,000 a year doctor. The spending habits determine the category, not the salary. The formula is simple. Multiply your age by your pre-tax annual household income, then divide by 10. A 40-year-old earning $150,000 should have approximately $600,000 in net worth. Those below this threshold are underaccumulators, spending their income rather than building wealth.
UAWs live in luxury, style, and comfort. They're often highly educated professionals in demanding careers. They understand compound interest intellectually, they just don't practice it behaviorally. Their spending habits stem from what researchers call the better-than theory. Each purchase represents an attempt to signal superiority. Better car than the neighbor, better watch than the colleague, better vacation than the sibling. These financial choices are called million-dollar choices because if the choice hadn't been made, the person would have over $1 million. Every single purchase in the status game has a true cost that only becomes visible decades later when there's nothing in the account and nowhere to go.
The original Millionaire Next Door research made this concept visceral with one specific example. One couple smoked 3 packs a day for 46 years. The cumulative cost of those cigarettes exceeded the value of their home by $33,000. Had they invested that money instead, the portfolio would have exceeded $2 million. Status purchases work the same mathematical way. The difference between a $30,000 car and an $80,000 car is $50,000 at purchase. But invested over 25 years at 7% annual returns, that difference becomes $270,000. That's the real price of looking wealthy, not the sticker price, the compounded price. The cultural programming that drives visible consumption starts early and reinforces constantly. Stanley and Danko observed that young people are indoctrinated with the belief that those who have money spend lavishly, and if you don't show it, you don't have it. This programming comes from everywhere. Television glamorizes expensive lifestyles. Social media displays curated consumption. Advertising promises that purchases will transform your identity. The message is relentlessly consistent. Rich people look rich. If you want to be seen as successful, you need to display your success through consumption. This belief is demonstrably false, but its effects are real. Someone who internalizes this narrative will spend their entire income maintaining appearances. They'll reach 55 with a closet full of luxury goods and a retirement account that cannot sustain them.
Something interesting is happening culturally. According to Bain & Company's 2024 luxury report, affluent consumers are increasingly prioritizing longevity and craftsmanship over conspicuous consumption. Stealth wealth has become a form of modern social currency. A 2024 Accenture survey found that 52% of global shoppers now prefer influencers who showcase practical luxury rather than aspirational excess. When the TV show Succession ended, searches for understated luxury brands spiked globally. The appeal wasn't flashy logos or obvious branding. It was the opposite. Wealth that only those who truly understand it can recognize. The cultural tide is shifting. The people who figured this out decades ago weren't ahead of fashion, they were just ahead of most people's understanding of what wealth actually is.
The practical advantages of looking ordinary extend into every financial interaction. Negotiation becomes easier when the other party doesn't know your position. A car dealer treats someone in a Honda Civic differently than someone stepping out of a Mercedes. A contractor quotes differently based on the neighborhood they're driving into. Warren Buffett once noted that he never worried about being overcharged because nobody knew he was wealthy. His modest appearance gave him negotiating leverage that flashy consumption would have eliminated. Service providers, salespeople, and contractors all calibrate their prices based on perceived ability to pay. Looking wealthy invites premium pricing. Looking ordinary receives standard pricing. Over a lifetime of purchases, this pricing differential accumulates into serious money. The employment dynamics also favor the invisible wealthy. Coworkers who perceive you as a regular person treat you as an ally. Bosses who perceive you as hungry assume you need the job. Clients who perceive you as modest don't resent your fees. The moment visible wealth enters a professional relationship, the dynamics shift in ways that mostly work against you. Colleagues wonder why you're still working if you've already made it. Bosses question your commitment when something doesn't go your way. Clients suspect you're overcharging. The quietly wealthy employee maintains the appearance of needing the job while having the complete security of not needing it. This is an extraordinarily powerful position. They can take risks that desperate employees cannot. They can negotiate from strength while appearing to negotiate from need. They can walk away from toxic situations without anyone seeing it coming. Family dynamics improve dramatically when wealth is invisible. Research from the Millionaire Next Door found a negative correlation between receiving money from parents and the children's own wealth accumulation. The more adult children receive, the less they accumulate through their own efforts. Giving money to adult children sends a subliminal message that the parent doesn't believe they can make it on their own. The children fail to distinguish between wealth they generated and wealth received as gifts. They perceive themselves as more productive than they actually are, which creates negative consumption habits that persist. Parents who look middle class while being quietly wealthy can provide support strategically rather than under constant social pressure. Their children develop self-reliance because they don't know there's a safety net. Family relationships remain uncomplicated by visible financial inequality. Here's what the psychology research shows about visible purchases.
Research on hedonic adaptation shows that increases in wealth create temporary spikes in happiness, but baseline levels return. The BMW provides a thrill for weeks, then becomes just your car. The watch impresses for months, then becomes invisible. Each visible purchase delivers diminishing emotional returns, while permanently reducing financial capital. Invisible wealth works completely differently. The growing net worth provides a constant sense of security that does not adapt away. The person knows they could handle any emergency. They know they could walk away from any situation. They know their future is protected. This background security influences everything and never gets boring. It never becomes normal in the way that the BMW becomes normal. You don't habituate to freedom the way you habituate to things.
Let me put the full 25-year picture side by side so the math is impossible to argue with. Someone earning $200,000 annually who saves 25% accumulates $50,000 per year before investment returns. Over 25 years, at 7% average returns, that grows to approximately $3.4 million. This person looks middle class. They drive a Toyota. They live in a modest home. Someone earning the exact same $200,000 who saves only 5% while spending the rest on visible consumption accumulates $10,000 per year. Over the same period, that grows to approximately $680,000. This person looks wealthy. They drive a luxury car. They live in a premium neighborhood. After 25 years, the invisible wealthy person has 5 times the net worth of the visible spender. 5 times. Same income, same years, completely different outcomes. One made choices that compound. The other made choices that consume.
The Millionaire Next Door lifestyle represents a fundamental reframe of what success actually means, and it's one of the cleanest ideas in all of personal finance. Success isn't what you can buy. Success is what you don't have to buy. Success isn't the things you own. Success is the freedom you've purchased with money you didn't spend. The goal was never to impress people you don't know. It was never to signal your arrival to strangers in a parking lot. The goal was always freedom, from financial anxiety, from a job you hate, from a system that requires you to keep performing until you're 70 because there's no way out.
Let's come back to the Civic and the parking lot. The coworkers who walk past it and feel a flicker of superiority, they're looking at a car. The owner sees something completely different. He sees a choice, a deliberate, calculated, mathematically informed choice to value compound growth over social approval. The people who notice the old car and feel superior are the same people who will work until they're 70 because they have no option to stop. The person driving it could stop working tomorrow. Every millionaire who drives a Toyota understood something that most people spend their entire careers never figuring out. Wealth isn't about what you show, it's about what you keep.
The invisible wealthy don't follow a complicated strategy. Their habits are actually very simple. They're just the opposite of what the culture tells you to do. First, drive a reliable car, not an impressive one. The car is the single largest discretionary status purchase most people make. Getting this one decision right over your lifetime is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in compounded returns. Second, live in a house that you can genuinely afford, not one that signals where you've arrived. The bigger the mortgage relative to your income, the less room the compounding has to work. Third, let the gap between your income and your spending stay open. This is the one. Every time income goes up and you resist the pull to spend it all, you are handing the compounding engine more fuel. That gap is where wealth is built. Close it with consumption, and you've closed the door.
Let's make this immediately practical. Right now, in the next 10 minutes, calculate where you actually stand. The PAW formula. Multiply your age by your pre-tax annual household income, then divide by 10. That's your expected net worth benchmark. If you're 40 years old and earning $80,000, your benchmark is $320,000. If you're 35 and earning $120,000, your benchmark is $420,000. Are you above your number or below it? Be honest. If you're below, you're an underaccumulator. And almost certainly it's because spending is consuming the gap that compounding should be filling. If you're above it, you're already thinking like a paw whether you knew it or not.
Here's a question worth sitting with. Who are you actually trying to impress with the things you buy? Most people, if they're honest, will name people they barely know. Coworkers, acquaintances, strangers in traffic. People whose opinions will have exactly zero impact on whether their life turns out well. The invisible wealthy have a different answer to that question. They're not performing for anyone. They're building something. And the audience for what they're building isn't coworkers in a parking lot. It's their future self. The version of them who either has options or doesn't, who either has freedom or doesn't.
That is the only audience that matters, and that audience cannot be impressed by a car.
Looking poor is a strategic advantage that pays dividends across every dimension of life simultaneously. It protects your wealth from criminals who target visible affluence. It shields your relationships from financial distortion. It preserves your negotiating position in every transaction you'll ever make. It maintains your children's motivation to build their own success. It provides psychological security without hedonic adaptation. And it compounds financial resources without the constant social pressure to spend. The cost of this strategy is minimal. Some people will assume you have less than you do. Some people will underestimate your success. But these are features, not bugs. The goal was never to impress people you don't know. The goal was always freedom. The 2011 Civic in the parking lot isn't a symbol of struggle. It's a symbol of someone who figured out the game everyone else is still playing and quietly decided not to play it.
If this gave you a different way to think about the relationship between appearance and actual wealth, hit that like button and subscribe. Every week I break down the real research and math behind why some people quietly build wealth while others earn well and end up with nothing to show for it. If you want to go deeper on the behavioral side of this, the video on the minimalist money rules is right there. That one covers the 10 specific habits that separate the quietly wealthy from high earners who stay broke. I'll see you there.